Hello everyone, Sigmund Droid here from Bunker 8. We're going to take a couple minutes to take you through Symphonic Intense 4 on how to create your own beat, loop content, the audio content, really easily and really simply in your own productions. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how the content is structured. So if you have a file browser on your DAW itself, there's one in Ableton Live, there's one in Apple Logic, there's one in Cubase as well. In this case example, we're looking at Cubase. Preset a tempo here for 115. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the content from the library itself into the track. If you open that folder, you'll notice that the tempo is the first thing that's included. In this case, it's 115, and it's followed by the key signature, and then the actual part itself. Now, anything that is labeled complete is an actual complete collection, or sort of what's known as a group. So if I was to click on this upper orchestral complete, now you can see that that's a complete mix, including all of the reverb and all of the settings for what is essentially the upper orchestral elements in the track itself. And if we were to click on the lower orchestral complete, now these completes are really, really handy. They're a great way to sort of very, very quickly put an idea together. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of these completes to show how exactly you can pull ideas together. And also we're going to pull in individual elements that have a sort of secondary sort of layering to them. So the first thing we'll do is we'll pull in the actual beat itself. Okay. Now I've set this to 115. You can have your tempo set to anything. And what we recommend here is that although these beats are acidized themselves, what we do in a production sense here to have things to be sample accurate is we actually time stretch the loops to a new setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower the tempo to 105 here, and we'll notice that of course the beat shrinks. In this case in Cubase it's very easy, so we're going to apply a sizing time stretch here. And now we'll listen to the beat again. In this case 10 beats per minute less. We haven't lost any of the audio integrity, the actual sound itself. And of course, if we were to undo that command and we were to set it to 120 and play it again, time stretch it, you're doing it this way, you're not getting any of the artifacting. Now, typically you can go about 20 beats per minute, one direction or the other, even as high as about 30 beats per minute on things that have very, very clear transients without a lot of artifact or change. Anything much beyond that, you are going to experience some sort of artifact sound. And if you use Apple looping or you use acidizing, it's going to be even more prominent because it's going to be dependent on the transients that have been set aside in the file. And for rhythmic elements, those are precise. For melodic elements, they are far more imprecise. So now that we have the tempo, we're going to set it to 120, and then we're going to use the same low orchestral example we originally listened to. Okay, so let's drag that element in. Now, notice again that it doesn't line up, of course. Sizing applies time stretch in this case. We'll drag it back. And now that same loop that was at 115. Now let's have a listen to the click itself and see how accurate it is. We can see by doing that the downbeats are very, very precise because we're using a time stretch functionality, because we're not actually asking our machines to, in real time, calculate the transient distances which happen between the various beats. So if you're looking at the beat itself, the transient times are going to happen between those various beats, and your computer's going to have to calculate those continuously if you're playing a loop back. But if you're actually dragging the content in, copying it at the new tempo information, and then making the tempo changes with time stretching, you're doing it the one time. And you can do that type of continuous time stretching even if you're changing tempo itself throughout, even if you're extending or delaying it. There is a convenience to using acidizing or Apple looping, and I'm not dissuading anyone from using those technologies, and they're useful where you're doing everything to precise frame rate, which we do often when we're doing and working on film content, especially when it comes to things like orchestral music for film and television and so on. You're going to want that precise frame rate to be there. We have, of course, used this lower orchestral example. It doesn't really need to be the entire content loop. Why don't we just lose that loop for a second? We're going to remove this track. We're going to leave the beat in. Let's pull in another element. So I'm going to go to a completely different track itself. It happens to be written in the same key. So let's pull up the same key signature. So this is a nice cello arpeggio that is being played at 128. Drag it in here. Again, we're going to take it and we're going to stretch it a bit, and let's listen. That sounds great. So I'm going to combine that with a little bit of the Orthos My Brother content. Let's get the timpanis going. Timpanis are always a terrific way to create accents in an orchestral setting, and these timpanis have been done in a live context, and they've also been done in the correct stage position as well. So you will notice that the timpani, depending on where and when and the particular timpani drum has been struck, it's in a different position. So why don't we just take that, and we're going to just change the little bit of the tempo there. I like that. So what we're going to do from there is we're going to take the, show you how we're going to put a few different elements together. So we've seen how time stretching and how these other capabilities work. We're going to take a few minutes here and we're going to combine a few different tracks from a few different loop sets to show you how they can be done. So that's a very, very nice violin set, and the violin set is accent based. So it's an accent that could very much stand on its own. Going to move this content out. I'm going to move it out 4 bars here, and we'll start the introduction with this. And of course, remembering that we need to do a little bit of a loop change there. So there we are. So this is also positioned in the correct stage position for using a violin. So it's in the right stage position for, in this case, second violin. So that's a lot at once. And when we typically have these types of cues to create a lot of drama, we're going to only introduce a few elements, and we're going to keep the percussion fairly spare, and we're going to bring it in later. So I'm going to layer the percussion in later in the track. So we're going to first bring in this violin, which is accenting the top part of the beat, which is, when we look at it, we can see here that the dynamic range of it, you can see that the dynamic range, because it's a live instrument, does change and does evolve. So you can see in the first half of it, the dynamic range on the beats, the first beats here, are lower than the dynamic range on, and we go again with that piece. Now you can notice just with those two instruments a lot of what orchestration it consists of, and a lot of why this library is very well broken down. You can see that the cello arpeggios, which are in a different position stage-wise, stage right, which is left, the violins are positioned more, and the cellos are positioned more stage right. So you'll notice that when the two pieces play together, they fill out the stereo field very nicely. They're not right up the middle. and as a result of their natural stage position, and also as a result of the fact that cellos are playing an arpeggiated part. The upper cellos are playing an arpeggiated part. The violins are playing an accented part, which increases the tension. It means that they're not all glued together. It's not a synthetic sound. It's a very, very natural sound. And you can see that there is a tremendous amount of dynamic range just between those two parts. Offering the meter, so if you look at any kind of conducting that happens in a symphonic orchestra, you'll notice that there's coming in very strongly on those downbeats, and that's emphasizing a lot of the rhythm. And then, of course, if we were to bring those elements in together, we're just going to simply duplicate them. Now we'll listen. When we actually bring in the deep beat, we'll bring in it a little bit later. So the timpani. Now, you remember that bum, 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 bum is happening with the timpanis itself, and you notice with the violins, they're offering that level of contrast. There's all that kind of variation. So if we don't like that particular timpani part, we're not happy with it, we can go to another arrangement. We can find another accented type sound. So that might seem like it's a little bit of a crazy idea. It's being in C minor, and how's it going to work? Not the most ideal piece of music, but arpeggiated sounds in a synthetic context really fill up the lower end. So even if we take that and now we're going to take a longer lead sound, drop it in. It's still in the same key, so we don't have to mess around with key. Yes, synthesizers and real strings work very, very well together, and they happen a lot in modern composition, and they happen in a very, very subtle way. Synthesizers have a tremendous dynamic range, which is unique and very, very different from orchestral instruments. You're going to get that contrast, and a lot of what Symphonic Intense does is it contrasts electronic instruments with real orchestral instruments, and that's how you get that well-rounded balance. Happy looping, and good luck to all.